Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers likes, double tap. Now they control your life, Dopamine swipe.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the 817 podcast. EJ, happy Halloween to all of y'all listening on Monday. Happy Dia de los Muertos if you celebrate that. And it's election week. Tuesday is election day. If you did not listen to our episode last week talking about everything that's on the ballot, the 8 Texas constitutional amendments, the 2 Tarrant County bonds, and the 4 Fort Worth ISD bonds, make sure you listen and share that and go vote on Tuesday. EJ, how are you feeling this weekend?
Feeling like the weather's good, feeling like there's a lot of things going on across the city, so it's super cool. I mean, there's tons going on around Halloween events, all different parts of Fort Worth. So, yeah, I think it's super cool time, especially if you have a kid and family and you're trying to do kid-friendly stuff. Seems like a vibe in kid-friendly stuff.
Yeah, Big Duck was out yesterday at Trinity Park. I didn't make it out to it, but that happened yesterday.
I did see the pictures, though. That thing is, like, serious. Like, that thing is, like, it was like Godzilla going through the Trinity River.
Yeah.
A very cute, nice one.
Somebody needs to, maybe, like, Panther City Air can make, like, a video of animating the rubber duck coming to life and, like, crawling through and destroying downtown. Yeah, it was, like, the pictures made it look massive.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. I think this was cool. I mean, it was a very simple week, but I think there, really exciting stuff going on.
Slow news week for sure.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and hit what I think is the most exciting stuff is that the National Juneteenth Museum will be built in Fort Worth beginning spring 2022. Fort Worth will become the home of the National Juneteenth Museum, people. That is something that we talked about after Opal Lee and went to D.C. and confirmed Juneteenth as a national holiday. So I think, this idea that it's going to be in Southside, it's going to be in the location where Opal Lee's existing museum is off of East Rosedale Street. It's going to be a new build, and it's expected to cost around $25 to $30 million, and be ready sometime in 2023. Jimmy, what do you think?
I mean, this is awesome. I think we've mentioned the idea of this probably a half dozen times over the last year plus on the show of like how cool would it be if Fort Worth would like cement itself on Opal Lee's legacy and like becoming a home for learning about Juneteenth. And so it's super cool to see this start to come to fruition and know that those conversations were being had. The renderings of it look amazing. Mm-hmm. Like I think it's going to fit in super well in the historic South Side and the other development that's going to be going on in there. Yeah, I mean, when you saw this article before I did, and when you sent it to me, my jaw just kind of dropped. I was like, wow, like this is actually going to happen. This is so cool. Such an incredible thing for Opal to get to see, and all the people that have surrounded her and the Juneteenth organization, getting to like see the fruits of their labor. Super excited for them.
Yeah, NBC DFW says the museum is expected to open in early 2024. So it looks like that might be more of the likelihood there. And just a little bit, right? Like every year, Opal does the 2.5 mile walk to symbolize the time it took for slaves in Texas to learn of their freedom. And so I think like I'm going to be really cool how that continues on as well from here. The idea of that 2.5 mile walk.
Yeah.
year over year, and just like a celebration, and even just like celebrating Juneteenth as a whole. Yeah, I mean, we brought this up multiple times. I mean, relating it to Black Wall Street in Tulsa and the idea of Black history being a asset and a high thirst for in Americans, especially. I feel like millennials and young Americans who aspire to understand our history that wasn't just written by old white men,
Oil
and gas of Texas, but even just of the South, and and I think it being in the fabric of the South Side, the historic South Side. But what we also need to know too, though, is we also did talk about these new neighborhoods coming up there that is starting to be expensive. What does it look like long term, and how does it all play together? It's going to be fun to see. But all of this stuff, I feel like it seems like we're building some true vision in the historic South Side to be just a really good section of vibrancy for people of color and people of Fort Worth that wants to be proud of the whole loop.
Yeah, one thought I had this week as I took my kid to the zoo, and there were like 8 or 10 school buses of Fort Worth ISD first graders there. Was that under like the new Texas law? I don't think that any Texas public school would be able to take their students on a field trip to this museum.
What's the
right under like the new law that bars talking about critical race theory or anything of that nature? Like, that was just like an interesting thought to me of like, we're gonna have this asset in our city, but like local kids, it's just part of supplemental education because Fort Worth ISD or public school kids couldn't go on a field trip there because it talks about racism and slavery and paints a certain picture of that era.
Yeah, you bring up, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, I feel like that would be more, right. I mean, the South Lake Aledo public schools that wouldn't, I feel like Fort Worth ISD is progressive enough and fights enough for representing their kids. I feel like where it wouldn't be a dent locally, but like if people come
maybe,
out,
but the Grapevine superintendent that has been under fire, been removed from his position, even though everybody loved him, because he was allowing that conversation to happen. Yeah. So I like, who knows what 3 years from now that's going to look like, or what those conversations will be. Hopefully things have changed by then. But that was just a thought that I had of like current state. I don't know if students would be allowed to go on a field trip there, which as a supplemental education thing, there's obviously inequality there and who has the best access and time to get to that.
I think where I'm interested in is it looks like it's a mixture of funding that's doing this. So it's like, and it's going to have national marks on it. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, my fear is like, if it's up to Fort Worth wealth and Fort Worth people to really put in what this should look like and what this should be, that's kind of concerning. Like, this shouldn't look like a little, like, I'm in and out in 15 minutes kind of museum. Like, it should be like, oh, I type in what to do in Fort Worth, and it should go, stockyards, all that stuff. But this is, the zoo. Like, we should expect people who are doing those two things in a day also consider this, because this pops up on the radar.
Yeah, like, are we talking DC level National Air and Space Museum, or are we talking the Leonard's Department Store Museum?
Yeah.
And based on the renderings and even 25 to 30 million, like I think we're looking more at the former. But I agree. Where exactly is this funding coming from? What say do those parties have in the formation of this? Could go a long way towards execution. But with the people that we know are behind it as of now, it feels like it's in the right hands.
Yeah, and individual corporate donors and government partners, it looked like it could all be really city, local people making this happen.
I wonder if stimulus money could go towards this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I know that they were looking at putting some of that money towards the convention center, so I wonder if that could be used in the same way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, super exciting, and can't wait.
Moving on, a city councilor was in the news this week as District 4 councilor Cary Moon, favorite councilor of the podcast, is mulling a run for the Republican nomination for State House District 93. That's currently held by State Rep Matt Krause, who is going to be running for Texas Attorney General. Cary said that by the 9th, which is not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, that city council meeting has space for announcements and declarations from the city councilors, that he should have his announcement by then. And then after that, if he does choose to run, he would still hold his city council seat until a special election happened, which I believe would be in next May. So that's an interesting development. He just won re-election again. It will be interesting to see if maybe Tara Wilson would try and run again for that.
She did
seat.
say she is. She said she will be.
She will be?
Yeah.
So the person that he was most closely contested to would be running again when that special election happened. It'll be interesting to see who tries to fill his seat. And even what by next May, we don't even know what that future district will look like for 2023. So with the new maps being redrawn. So a lot of potential moving and shaking happening here.
Now that we talk about this, I didn't put it together because, man, it was a busy week. It's been busy from a work perspective. But you were saying, you sent this to me, and I was like, okay, I guess that's cool. He's out of here. But now the idea that the potential for another minority, the potential of another potential progressive,
an actual progressive,
yeah. Like, she did get 25%, right, of the votes there. So Cary could, who knows who's going to try to place there and pump up. So it's not like there's a, and I don't know how special elections work now it's not that many people is going to show up, or does a lot of people show out? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I wonder
now that you're not going for the mayor as well. Like, will people in that district, do they still go out and vote at the same capacity?
I wonder if this would be the same election as us certifying new district maps would be. And if so, that might draw a bigger crowd than if it's just a District 4 city election. Because obviously, that's a small sliver of people. relative to the rest of the city that will have focus on this. Yeah, Cary is always going to be in the doghouse with us for his DWI and coming out and saying that it wasn't a big deal because nobody got hurt, didn't face any sort of, he made it disappear the way you would expect somebody of his
and got promoted.
Stature and power, to make that disappear. So, I think both of us would not be sad to see him leaving his city council seat.
But with Tara Wilson, by the way, we had a pod with her when she ran against Cary the first time. Well, I guess the only time against Cary. But you could hear her story and just kind of all of that. Seems like she's just been also since then have stayed really involved, stayed very invested, really sharpening her. Just like I just feel her confidence and just like what she's doing and who she's connecting with. So I think the fact that she was out there, I think gave her some really like, hey, I'm here for it. I'm not just like, I think she has the bug to want to do it. And I think for Cary too, like, I mean, the gossip around it that he's super ambitious and he, I think, aspired to do stuff locally. But now that, with his incident with the DUI coming from his out of Fort Worth bar, driving in Fort Worth cities, that's hard to do now. So now you can go into like these seats that a lot of people, don't really know what they do because it's like, it's more like state and districts at that level. Like I feel like people in the city, he can get away. Like no one cares about the DUI way out there.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I wonder how on his mind this was in running for re-election. Like obviously now, like Tara probably has a better shot against a non-incumbent. Just in politics in general, defeating an incumbent is very difficult. So he knew that if he was going to do something else, he would at least get to hold this seat for a year. But like, how attentive are you going to be able to be when you're trying to campaign for a primary that happens in March? So like you're going from November through March, going all out, trying to win the Republican nomination for this seat, while also, having your normal life and then also being a city councilor. It feels like, I don't know, maybe he's holding the seat for a more conservative group, and so there's like value to him in that. But you kind of, if this was on your mind at all, you kind of knew that you wouldn't really be up for the task. Like it's the same, Betsy Price could have run for mayor again, even though she knew she wanted to move on and put us in a similar sort of situation. She chose to not do that so that she could focus on running for Tarrant County judge. Or maybe this is something that he was like, you know what, now's the time, I'm going to go do it. But I imagine that this was more thought out than just like spur of the moment. You know what, like I think I'm going to run for this. So I wonder where the planning has been, because now he does get to have the say on redistricting for Fort Worth districts, as opposed to if Tara had won back in May, the dynamic of the council would be significantly different right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It may be, the whole.
Also, though, I hope that this
is also just it's not for sure.
Not for sure.
Put his leg out, see what happens.
Yeah. But I hope that this pumps the brake on brakes on the soccer stadium talk.
Yeah, and that's still like it says he currently is working to make the city's payroll system more accurate for its about 7,000 employee and bring a soccer stadium to the city. And so it seems like that is still his like, and then quote, I'm the fiscal conservative guy. You know, what I think would be interesting too, though, is how do you sell yourself for the District 93 seat of what your accomplishments were in Fort Worth? Because he's gonna have to say some conservative stuff like, "Oh, I kept it. You know, we didn't spend money here. Or we did this." Like, you know, and then like I feel like people in Fort Worth is like, "Wow, you're really proud of that? Like that's what you're telling people about what you're proud you did in Fort Worth."
Yeah.
To highlight his constituents or stuff like that.
Yeah. But also, like, I think that these new state maps are getting drawn so that they're going to lean more and more conservative. Like, he's going to have to obviously put that stuff out there to try and win the primary, but I imagine once he wins the primary, he's probably not going to have a huge contest to win that seat, or whoever wins the Republican nomination is not going to have a huge contest to win that seat, because of how the new districts are being drawn. And so maybe that's part of what was going into the thinking is now that he's seen what District 93 looks like, it looks more and more promising for him or anyone to put themselves out there to try and get that spot, knowing that if you win the primary nomination, you've probably got it in the bag to get that state seat. Yep. Like, there's a lot less risk now than it would have been a couple years ago.
And like you said, special election could be held May of 2022.
So regardless of what he says on the 9th, he will hold the seat until then.
Yep. All right, so we're going to short story number 3, and it's a shorter one than the last two, but a virtual forum is taking place Thursday evening. Will give community members the opportunity to learn more about the state of Fort Worth Police Department, and it works to improve race relations and public trust. Fort Worth Police Monitor Kim Neal will sit down with 2 members of local nonprofit Community Frontline via Facebook at 7 p.m., speaking about the department's current efforts and plans for the future. Dante Williams, Community Frontline President and co-founder, and Joshua Rivers, the nonprofit's Community and Police Relation Coordinator, will lead the conversation. And so we will have the information to sign up there.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how, like, cooperative or happy-go-lucky this conversation is, because I imagine that Community Frontline has plenty of issues with the police monitor's office and the way that the police oversight committee has gone or not really gone relative to what we were promised. But I appreciate Kim making herself available and people having the opportunity to engage with her and learn about what her office can be doing in the future. There's been a lot of, I would say, not very encouraging conversation from the current city council over the last, there's more so over the summer about the role of the police oversight committee and trying to parse through what that means, who's eligible to be on that. And I would say that has been taking more and more steps back, more and more steps away from what the Race and Culture Task Force recommended us to do. And so I could see her being on the hot seat a little bit depending on who shows up to this. But 7 p.m. via Facebook, Kim Neal sitting down with Community Frontline. Really encourage you to watch, participate in whatever way they make available to participate, because it's obviously a major topic in Fort Worth over the last few years and coming into Aaron Dean's murder trial.
Yeah. All All right, we're going to move to the big story. Big story is something we often talk about, but where do Texas and Tarrant County's transplants hail from? Here are the top 3 spots. This is October 28th in the Star-Telegram by Jess Harden. It basically talks about during 2020, more than 3% of all out-of-state transplants hailed from Los Angeles County, according to a new study from Texas Real Estate Research Center, Texas A&M University. 16% of newcomers were from the state of California. Florida, it was 7.2%. I guess I will hold on the big kickers and let you jump in, and then you can share some of these points that you felt that were more interesting to you than maybe others.
Yeah, so we were doing some math before we started recording, and LA County accounts for about 3% of the national population, so that's not that, crazy that 3% of the national population is where 3% of our growth is coming from. Those numbers line up. But California accounts for about 8% of the national population, and so to have 16% of our growth coming from California, that's a pretty significant gap. Florida, being 7.2%, is pretty on par with what their national population is. So I'm less interested in the LA County piece and more interested in where are people coming from the rest of California, which we don't really get the answer from this article. And where in Tarrant County are they moving to? I appreciate this article as kind of here's an interesting fact, let's start a conversation. But I feel like I walked away from it with more questions than answers. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm looking at it, said that out of the top 10 of out-of-state counties from which new Tarrant County residents move, Southern California accounts for half. And then the kicker there was Los Angeles County's median home price is $795,000. But I thought the kicker too was just hey, most people who are moving to Tarrant County are your Texan neighbors. 84% of new residents are Texans. And I think what you're saying is true too. It's which part of Tarrant County is having vibrancy from our fellow Texans,
Yeah. Well, and another piece is this quote saying that Californians are paying $200,000 or more over asking price. We've heard these stories from realtors. That's not putting something like that in a story like this, to me, is creating a false expectation of where the housing market is. House values have increased. Every house isn't selling for a significant amount over asking price, to me, that creates a false expectation. And even seeing houses in our neighborhood that are going up for sale that really aren't ready for sale, but are just getting thrown up there. And then you see the value come down and down and down as it sits on the market for a few weeks. It seems like people have this false perception of where things are right now, and little quotes like this kind of add it to that false perception. But I think and $200,000 over asking price is a lot more significant on a $200,000 house versus a $1.5 million house.
Yeah.
So if they're coming in to wealthier West Fort Worth neighborhoods, it's still a significant amount of money, but it's a lot less relative to if people are coming into Meadowbrook and paying $500,000 for a $200,000 house.
Yeah.
But I think it does ask the question of what's the what's the breakdown of people moving here from California as far as race, ethnicity, political persuasion, and where are they moving to in Tarrant County, because this could look a lot different depending on the answers to those questions.
Yeah, like you said, it seems like hopefully a starter story to maybe a series of more detail around where residents migrating to.
Right. And also 84% of our growth is coming from in Texas. And so I would love to ask those questions. Why'd you choose Tarrant County? Why'd you choose Fort Worth? Where are you moving from? Can you work remotely? Are you choosing to drive over to Dallas now?
Are you from one of the metro areas? Or are you coming from West Texas because opportunity is kind of sparse or whatever,
right,
out there or something like that? Are you coming from Abilene? Are you coming from Lubbock, Amarillo, rather than coming from Austin or Houston?
Yeah, and Texas obviously has a very conservative view of towards immigration. And while we're free to move amongst the states as we please, we can still think of intra-US migration patterns as immigration. And to me, numbers like this, the don't California my Texas garbage, it just further creates this sense of lack of Texas Southern hospitality that we're supposed to be known for. Which, whether that's true or not, who cares? But this just to me creates a sense and an atmosphere that is not about loving your neighbor, being open and welcoming. This is creating more and more of a mindset of, oh, you moved here from California, you're the one screwing up my city and my state.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that animosity is necessary or healthy. And Fort Worth wants to pride itself, and Texas in general wants to pride itself on its growth, and people want to come here, but we don't actually want people to come here. When people do come here, we look down upon them and think differently towards them. And I had this conversation with a month ago. I was in an Uber, and my driver had moved from San Diego within the last year.
Oh, cool.
And I was asking him, why'd you choose here? How's it been? And he was like, yeah, we kind of learned to not tell people that we moved from California, because of where they felt like when they were telling neighbors that, people took a different tone towards them, sometimes wouldn't be as welcoming. And that just left a really negative taste in my mouth of that's not what I know Texas is supposed to be about, and Texans are supposed to be about. And we can't pride ourselves on or be excited about growth if we're going to dump on the people that are driving that growth.
Yeah. There's two things that why you were sharing that I felt like that kind of registered some thoughts. Is I had an experience in California, and I think I shared this on the pod before, but it was around how I was in LA, and my wife likes Goodwill shopping and thrift shopping, and so we were on Montrose or whatever, and she's out there going through all the I think garbage, but treasures to her, and I'm just sitting there, and the people who are bringing in new clothes to get money, and they're doing the whole exchange, and they're just talking to each other because they're regulars, and the person was just I just got back from Dallas, and it is so cool, and I feel like it's like a hidden LA, and like the other person's like, yeah, I've been like, all my friends are talking about Dallas, and I was just like, I literally took my wife all the way to LA because she's never been to California to come hang out with you guys, and you guys are talking about where we live. It's like a very interesting concept of how like everyone, I feel like, aspires somewhere that other people, you're like, why would you aspire to that? It's just funny to hear what people think are like these new treasures, but then the other people, it's just like, you know. And then my other thing is how will I think, you know, Texas has been like, Tony shared on the pod a couple of times about recruiting teachers nationally. It's like nobody wants to come to Texas because of the laws that are happening, and all that. And it's like, you know, if you're, especially if you're like a woman of color who wants to come and feel safe, like this has not been a state that's felt that welcoming. And so I think with Fort Worth has the unique advantage if we're going to be a staple in national history, Black history, with the Juneteenth Museum, to be an empowerment place and continue to leverage that to be a welcoming place for others where we don't have to carry the full Texas weight behind us. Like you said, we shouldn't do that. And so I don't know. I feel like if I told my friends from California who live in Oakland, like, oh, we got to go to like the Juneteenth Museum's in Fort Worth, we got to go. They'd be like, y'all got the Juneteenth Museum?
Yeah.
They would be like, well, that's super epic. And like, that'd be a cool experience. Even if they're coming off the airport and they're just here for like a day for work, to be able to take them there. I'd love taking them to the stockyards to like get their Texas photo for them. Like, oh yeah, there's a bull and some hats, and like they love that stuff. But then I could take them to stuff like, wow, this is super cool that you got like this is like some appreciation to the national story. And like, I think that would be cool for them to go talk to other friends. I just hung out in Fort Worth. It was super cool.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of benefit to Fort Worth and Texas in this growth. Like that's why we aspire to it.
Yep.
And so it just seems very dissonant to like the actual culture behind it that's has a negative viewpoint of California and thinks down upon like the state of California, even though like we're benefiting so much from Californians moving here. And another thought I had was like TCU's population is like 30 to 35% from California, and it's been that way for like a solid decade to 15 years now. And so I wonder how much familiarity with Fort Worth has been driven by like TCU going to the Rose Bowl, playing in a couple of bowl games in California. So then you've got like students applying here, students coming here. It becomes more of a brand name to their local communities out there because they know people that are here and then coming home for the holidays and maybe choosing to stay here long term. So I wonder if that's like been any sort of a driving factor or a leading indicator of the California migration here. But
that's good. I love all that, by the way. I felt like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like we said, like this article felt like the start of the conversation, and maybe as we see more and more census data, like we'll be able to actually dive into more of these questions and hopefully hear from people that have moved from California about where you moved to in the county, why you chose to move here. I mean, even like Southlake getting all the recognition that it had, not recognition's the wrong word, but all of the national focus that it has because of everything going on. Like, is Southlake going to be seen as this like haven for far right people to come move to? Like, are we going to have a bunch of further right people moving to Southlake because they see it as this like bastion of fighting for conservative rights?
That That's another side of Fort Worth. Fort Worth is very much Fort Worth and our suburb can definitely be the conservative metro of like the country, where people and how Alito and South Lake and all this is becoming famous, and there's big houses,
and like it's Fort Worth is like the last big county and city that's kind of on the borderline of that's really actually purple. And so like for the GOP side, it's like, can we get people to this area to hold it for us as opposed to wherever else they're moving to. So that's where I feel like the granular data of this will potentially provide a lot more answers and insight into long-term future of Fort Worth and how it's going to continue changing over the next decade.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get into wins and losses. We can start with losses.
Yeah, I'll start with my loss is the new Texas redistricting maps were signed by Greg Abbott this week. You can go to texastribune.org and look up where your district is now and how it's changed. So we both went from being part of Texas 6, which had its special election this past year, and was mostly comprised of like way south suburbs of Dallas. Like, we had no business being in Texas 6. We probably have no business being in our new district, which is District 33, and it is 75% Black, Hispanic, and Asian, 74% for Biden in 2020, and it runs up a very thin line up 121 all the way up to Carrollton, and then comes down into South and West Dallas. So basically what they did with the district this time around was they looked at a map, where do the POC in North Texas live, and they figured out how to draw the map around that. So our district, Texas 33, is now firmly a blue district, so I appreciate that I will have a representative that represents me now, but it is very indicative of what the wider Texas maps look like as far as how gerrymandered they are.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, very crazy. But I do like all those areas of the Metroplex, I will say. So, kudos to the coolest parts of DFW.
Yeah,
is our district. So, yeah, my loss is, just really quick. Nothing crazy. There was a story about substitute teachers in Fort Worth, and the shortage there. This was already a problem pre-pandemic, but now with quarantine and people having to go on quarantine so often, I mean, you're talking across the country, not just in Fort Worth. They're only able to fill 50% of teacher seats. I mean, so what's happening is honestly, it's happening, and I actually think it's in a way it's kind of good for schools, but a lot of admin and people who work in the district level or not in classrooms are now having to play the teacher role. And so you're having a lot of I have not met a principal who says they have not been substitute teacher that day. Mm-hmm. Everybody is doing it.
Yeah.
So I guess the loss is that I think, I guess the loss is that teacher shortages make it hard for also just long-term strategy in a need of what direction does our schools go to after all of this. It's hard to have long-term conversations when you're dealing with hey, our strategic people outside of the classroom are now also having to become teachers. So then the stuff that's not urgent but important, you might see long-term ramification benefits of that, consequences from that. But yeah, so that's my loss.
Yeah, I mean, when the administration or like visionaries, long-term planners are stuck in the weeds of day-to-day details, you lose that long-term vision. And even like it's a very specific type of person that can be a substitute teacher. One, because it doesn't pay basically anything. Two, because you have to have the time flexibility to, on almost a dime's notice, be able to say, yeah, I'm going to go work today. You know, I don't have like kids at home that need to be watched. I don't have other things going on that I need to do. So even just like the market for that really only fits like certain areas super well. And add in the dynamics of the pandemic, kids being home, people not wanting to, or even that demographic of people generally older, not wanting to be out as much, or people that typically put their kids in daycare, like daycare quarantine is happening all the time. So there's just a lot less flexibility. It might lead to looking at like, how do we make substitute teaching or having like flex teacher positions that are like teachers' assistants throughout the year, but then can hop into certain substitute roles if needed on days. Like, how do we plan better for this to stop relying on this like small niche of people that can fill this role?
Yeah.
Speaking of that just reminded me that the like FDA approved the 5-11 vaccine this week. So I believe it goes to the CDC now. Hopefully by the end of next week, your 5 to 11-year-olds will be eligible to get vaccinated. So that's a super exciting thing that realistically by Thanksgiving, we could have a large portion of school-age kids in the U.S. with at least one shot.
And the booster as well, though.
And boosters are widely available. Like,
I gotta go get mine.
Yeah, you can go to Tarrant County's website to find where those are. Or, I mean, you can basically just walk into any pharmacy at this point. Yep. Walk into Tom Thumb and get one. So make sure you're seeking out your booster.
Yeah, I was at a rave last night, and that was my thought. I was like looking around, and I was like, yeah, I should probably go get boosted. But yeah, let's go to wins.
Yeah, my win, and this is a big celebration for the Como community this week, is that a long-contested car wash has been demolished, and that might sound like a little kind of silly thing, but for the car wash hasn't been operational since the mid-'80s, and for years the building has been a landmark and point of reference in the community. It's known to neighbors as a place where a lot of crime, drugs, prostitution, etc. was taking place. And so, I mean, there were a lot of people out there celebrating that it was coming down, with the like everything going on with Las Vegas Trail that we've talked about over the last couple weeks. Like, there's just a lot of positives coming for the Como community, and that's really exciting to see. So just wanted to do a little highlight of that this week. That was from, if you want to read more about it, it was from Thursday in the Star-Telegram.
Yep, and my win is Cutting Edge Haunted House in the Fort Worth Magazine story here was celebrated 30 years and a big honor from USA Today. It was the number one haunted attraction in the U.S. according to USA Today's 10 best awards. And so super cool just having, something that's like, you obviously can see there's passion there by the owners and their team to do this here on, consistency. And just to be recognized for it, I think it's just super cool and super awesome. And I always love when I see their great marketing from the road to get people there. And and I was trying to go this weekend, and it was sold like out. Like it was like you're way too late to even think about Halloween weekend. So that's just cool. Being like, oh, I just thought, I live 5 minutes from it. I was like, I just drive down and go to do it, and then they're like, sorry, partner.
Yeah. I hate haunted houses. I hate spooky stuff. Like I'm a scaredy cat. But it's really cool to see Fort Worth get recognized for a place in Fort Worth get recognized for something like that. Because there's a massive market and community of people that I would imagine seek out the top haunts every year and travel to do something like this. And so I could definitely see that having like long-term tourism implications with how they leverage that for marketing. So really cool, like small little thing for East Fort Worth to have happen.
Awesome. We said it wasn't a big week of news, but we hit the National Juneteenth Museum. We hit Cary Moon, and Tara Wilson will be running if he says no. That's some big news right there.
Yeah.
She I emailed her and she said it is not a secret, all caps, if he does do this. So it's cool to have that connection to some of the great leaders here. And then just talking about all the population stuff and being asked our opinions around that.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Make sure you go vote by Tuesday, and we will see you next Sunday.
Peace.